Imagine looking up at the sky on an ordinary night and realizing that the moon, which has always been silver and peaceful, suddenly appears blood red. That's exactly what millions of people saw during the so-called blood moon. Photos spread across the internet. People stopped to watch. Some were fascinated, but many simply thought it's just an eclipse. But there is one detail that almost no one talks about. Thousands of years ago, long before telescopes, modern science or space, observatories, ancient texts talked about signs in the heavens, and among these texts are the records attributed to Enoch and the visions described by John in the Book of Revelation. Both mention times when the sky would change in unusual ways. In the Book of Revelation, John describes an impressive vision. The sun became black, and the moon became like blood. In the Book of Enoch, there are detailed descriptions of the order of the stars, the cycles of the moon, and signs in the sky, as if the sky worked like a great clock marking important events. Then, an intriguing question arises. If phenomena like the blood moon were already mentioned in ancient texts, were they just seen as natural events or as signs of something bigger? Throughout history, many cultures have believed that the sky speaks through signs. Kings, priests, and scholars watched stars, eclipses, and movements of the moon, trying to understand what they could mean. And this is exactly where the story gets even more interesting. Because when we put together what Enoch wrote about the heavens with the visions John described in Revelation, we begin to see a pattern that has intrigued scholars, theologians, and the curious for centuries. And perhaps the most important question is not why the moon turned red, but yes, what these ancient texts believed would happen after this sign. And to understand this, we need to go back even further in time, for a mysterious book that many consider one of the most enigmatic texts of antiquity. Before understanding the spiritual or prophetic meaning that many attribute to this event, it is important to understand what the blood moon really is. The so-called blood moon occurs during a total lunar eclipse. At this moment, the Earth is exactly between the sun and the moon, blocking direct sunlight. But even so, the moon does not disappear completely. Instead, something impressive happens. Light from the sun passes through the Earth's atmosphere, and this light is filtered. The lighter colors disperse, while the reddish tones continue traveling through space and end up illuminating the surface of the moon. That's why it appears that intense red color, almost as if it were dyed in blood. From a scientific point of view, it is a natural phenomenon that happens a few times over the decades. But throughout history, this event has never been seen as just something common. Ancient civilizations watched the skies very carefully. For many people, when the moon changed color, it was considered a powerful sign, often associated with changes, judgments, or important events. And in the Bible, we find something very curious. In Joel 2:31, it is written, "The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes." Centuries later, John repeats a very similar image in Revelation, describing a moment when the world witnessed impressive signs in the sky. This raises an intriguing question. If phenomena like the blood moon happen naturally, why do they appear described in such ancient prophetic texts? Could it be that the biblical authors were just using symbolic language? Or were they trying to record signs they believed had spiritual or prophetic significance? And this is where we enter one of the most mysterious texts of antiquity. Because in the Book of Enoch, there is an entire section dedicated to explaining how the movements of the moon, sun, and stars work. And according to this book, the heavens follow a precise order, almost as if they were a system created to mark times and signs. And when we understand this, we begin to see why so many people connect events like the blood moon with larger messages being revealed in the heavens. Now we need to go back even further in time, long before the Book of Revelation. There is an ancient and quite mysterious text called the Book of Enoch. This book is attributed to Enoch, the seventh from Adam, a figure mentioned briefly in the Bible. In Genesis, something curious is written about him. Enoch walked with God, and he was no longer found, for God took him to himself. This little phrase has always intrigued scholars. But what makes the Book of Enoch so interesting is that it provides detailed descriptions of how the heavens work. In a part known as the Book of the Celestial Luminaries, Enoch describes the movements of the sun, El, of the moon and the stars, explaining their cycles, their gateways to the sky, and how they follow a specific order. According to the text, nothing in the heavens happens by chance. The stars obey precise laws and defined cycles, almost as if they were part of a great system created to mark important times and events. For many researchers, this is surprising because the text seems to show a great concern with the celestial calendar, something essential for ancient cultures that observed the heavens to understand time, seasons, and important events. But there is something even more curious. The Book of Enoch suggests that the movements of the stars can serve as signs, not just to mark days or seasons, but also to indicate special moments in human history. This makes many people today wonder, if Enoch believed that the heavens function as a type of cosmic clock, would events such as eclipses or red moons just be coincidences? Or could they be seen as markers of important moments? And it is exactly at this point that the story gets even deeper. Because in the Book of Enoch, mysterious figures called Watchers also appear, beings who observed the earth and who, according to the text, had knowledge about the secrets of heaven and creation. And understanding who these Watchers were can reveal why the heavens have always been seen as bearing signs. But the Book of Enoch doesn't just talk about the movements of the moon, the sun, and the stars. It also features a group of mysterious beings called Watchers. According to the text, the Watchers were celestial beings, assigned to observe the earth and humanity. The name itself reveals their function. They were those who watched, observed, and followed what happened in the world. However, Enoch's account says that something unexpected happened. Some of these watchers broke the established order and began sharing knowledge with humans. Among this knowledge were secrets about nature, the cycles of the earth, and even the movements of the heavens. This includes things like knowledge about the stars, signs in the firmament, and interpretations of celestial phenomena. For many people who study this ancient text, it raises a fascinating idea that the heavens have always been seen as a type of language, something that could be observed to understand greater events. In other words, the sky would function almost like a great clock or signal system. Therefore, throughout history, phenomena such as eclipses, comets, or red moons have never been seen solely as astronomical events. Many cultures believed that these events could mark important moments or significant changes. And when we return to the topic of the blood moon, we notice something interesting. If ancient texts like Enoch's already talked about celestial order, signs in the heavens, and knowledge linked to the stars, perhaps it is no coincidence that centuries later John, in Revelation, also describes impressive signs happening in the sky. And it is exactly this connection that we will explore now. Because when John writes his visions in Revelation, he describes a moment when the heavens seem to react to events that are about to change the world. Centuries after the accounts attributed to Enoch, another biblical text presents an equally impressive vision of signs in the heavens, the Book of Revelation, written by the Apostle John. According to his own account, John was exiled on the island of Patmos when he began to receive visions about future events and events that would involve the entire earth. In one of these visions, a very powerful description appears. In chapter 6 of Revelation, John writes, "There was a great earthquake. The sun became black as a sack of horsehair, and the moon became like blood." This passage appears at an extremely important moment in the vision. The opening of the seals, a period described as marked by profound changes in the world. The detail that draws attention is that the signs begin precisely in the heavens. First, the sun darkens. Then the moon appears like blood. And then the stars seem to fall. For many biblical interpretations, this sequence suggests that celestial events accompany decisive moments in history. This makes an interesting connection emerge. Centuries before, the prophet Joel had already written something similar. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. Joel 2:31. That is, the image of the moon becoming like blood appears more than once in Scripture. For some scholars, these descriptions may be symbolic language used to represent times of great transformation. For others, they may be linked to real phenomena in the heavens that would occur at certain moments in history. And when we put these passages together with the idea based on the Book of Enoch, that the heavens follow an order and can function as signs, we begin to notice a pattern that has intrigued people for centuries. But this leads to an even more interesting question. If different ancient texts mention signs in the heavens happening before great events, is there a prophetic pattern linked to the movements of the sky? And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next point. When we look at different parts of the Bible, we notice something that is repeated several times. The heavens are used as signs. Since ancient times, the sun, moon, and stars were not only seen as celestial bodies, they were also considered markers of important times and events. In Genesis 1:14, for example, there is a passage that says, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs for seasons, days, and years." This phrase is very interesting because it shows that, from the beginning, the stars were associated not only with the passage of time, but also with signs. Throughout biblical history, we see moments in which phenomena in the sky appear linked to important events. For example, the star that guided the wise men until the birth of Jesus, signs in the sky described by the prophets, and the visions recorded in Revelation. This has led many scholars to believe that there is a type of symbolic or prophetic pattern linked to the heavens. It does not necessarily mean that each eclipse or each astronomical phenomenon has a specific meaning, but ancient texts show that the sky has always been observed as a kind of symbolic language, something that could reflect important events on Earth. And when we look at phenomena like the blood moon, it's natural that many people remember these ancient passages, because for those who study these connections, the question is not just what happened in the sky, but rather whether certain signs can coincide with important moments in history. And that is precisely why, when a blood moon occurs, so many interpretations and debates arise. But this brings us to an even deeper question. Could the blood moon be seen as a warning or warning of something bigger? That's what we're going to explore now. Whenever the blood moon appears, a question begins to circulate among Bible scholars, theologians, and even the curious. Could this phenomenon be a warning? Throughout history, many people believed that unusual changes in the sky did not happen by chance. For them, eclipses, comets, or reddish moons were seen as signs that something important was happening or about to happen. In biblical tradition, signs in the sky often appear before major changes, not necessarily as an exact prediction of a specific event, but as a warning for people to pay attention to the moment they are living in. Therefore, when the Bible speaks of the moon becoming like blood, many interpreters understand that this image can represent a period of transformation, judgment, or profound change. But there is an important point. Not everyone agrees that each blood moon has a direct prophetic meaning. Many scholars remember that lunar eclipses are natural phenomena that happen regularly. Even so, the fact that ancient texts associate celestial signs with important moments in history makes many people continue to reflect on these events. Perhaps the main point is not to predict exactly what will happen. Perhaps the real question is something else. Do these signs serve to draw people's attention to something bigger? For some, they are just fascinating astronomical phenomena. For others, they can function as moments that make people reflect on the time in which they live. And that is precisely why whenever a blood moon occurs, the debate resurfaces. But there is something even more interesting. Today, many researchers and interpreters try to analyze patterns of celestial signs throughout history to understand whether there is any connection between these phenomena and important events. And it is these modern interpretations that we are going to talk about now. Nowadays, the discussion about the blood moon has gained even more attention. This is because some Bible interpreters and prophecy researchers began to observe patterns between celestial phenomena and historical events. Some of them analyze sequences of lunar eclipses known as tetrads, when 4 total eclipses of the moon happen in sequence at certain periods. These scholars noted that at some moments in history, these tetrads coincided with important events involving nations, political changes, or landmark moments for the people of Israel. For example, some interpreters point out that some blood moon cycles occurred close to historical periods, significant ones. This caused many people to begin to wonder whether the heavens could be marking special moments in human history. But it is important to remember that these interpretations are not a consensus among all scholars. Many theologians and scientists argue that eclipses are natural phenomena that follow predictable cycles and should not be automatically linked to specific prophetic events. Still, the topic continues to arouse great curiosity. Because when we look at ancient texts, such as Joel, Revelation, and even the Book of Enoch, we realize that the idea of signs in the sky has always been part of the way people interpreted the world. And perhaps that's why, even today, in an age of telescopes and satellites, many people continue to look at the sky with the same question that existed thousands of years ago. Could certain signs in the sky coincide with important moments in history? This question takes us to the next point. Because if some people believe that the blood moon can function as a marker of time or a symbolic sign, then an inevitable question arises. What could happen after this type of signal? After the blood moon appears, many people begin to wonder, what happens after this type of sign? In the prophetic texts of the Bible, signs in the sky do not usually appear in isolation. They are often described as part of a sequence of events. For example, in Joel and Revelation, heavenly signs appear before periods described as times of great change on earth. This includes spiritual transformations, crises, and moments that lead people to reflect on the direction of humanity. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a single astronomical event triggers something specific immediately. Many scholars believe that these signs function more as symbolic markers of eras, moments that draw people's attention to the time in which they live. In other words, the blood moon could be seen by some as a reminder to watch what is happening in the world. And when we look at history, we realize that periods of change have always existed: social, political, spiritual, and cultural changes. Therefore, whenever impressive phenomena happen in the sky, they end up raising deep questions. Are we living in a time of transformation? Are these signs used to get people's attention? Or are they just natural events that coincide with important moments in history? Perhaps the answer depends on how each person interprets these signs. But there is one last reflection that connects everything we have seen so far. Enoch, the signs in the sky, and John's visions. Because in the end, the most important question may not be what happened in heaven, but if we are really paying attention to the signs that are around us. After everything we've seen, Enoch's account of the order of the heavens, the ancient prophecies, and John's stunning vision in Revelation, a question begins to arise. Perhaps the most important point is not just understanding the phenomenon of the blood moon, but reflecting on the meaning that the ancients gave to the signs in the sky. For Enoch, the heavens followed a precise order, almost like a system created to mark times and events. For prophets, signs in the sky often appeared before important moments in history. And for John, in Revelation, the heavens seemed to react when great changes were about to happen. This leads to deep reflection. If the ancients truly believed that the heavens function as signs, then perhaps the most important question is not just, why did the moon turn red? The real question might be, are we living in a time when people are once again looking at the heavens, trying to understand what they might mean? Throughout history, whenever impressive phenomena happened in the sky, they awakened something in people: curiosity, fear, reflection, and search for answers. Perhaps this is exactly what these events do to this day. They make people stop for a moment, look up, and wonder about the time in which they are living. And now the final question for those of you watching. Could it be that the blood moon was just a beautiful phenomenon, or a sign that is making people pay more attention to what is happening in the world? Because sometimes the true sign is not just in the sky, it's in the way people start looking for answers after seeing it. Have you ever seen the blood moon in the sky and wondered what it really means? Not just from an astronomical point of view, but from a prophetic, spiritual, and biblical point of view. Because something curious happens every time a blood moon rises. Millions of people stop, take out their cell phones, take photos, share on social media, and they say, "Look how beautiful she is." But while many simply admire the phenomenon, there's a much deeper question that almost no one asks. What if the blood moon is more than just an event in the sky? This question may seem strange to some, but for those who study biblical prophecies, celestial signs, and ancient texts, it is extremely relevant. Because long before telescopes, satellites, or modern science, two characters mentioned in the scriptures already spoke about signs in the heavens, Enoch and John. And the most impressive thing is that they both mention something very specific: a moon that becomes like blood. This appears in the visions described in the Book of Revelation, when John reports events that would happen before decisive moments in the history of humanity. But it also appears in even older texts attributed to Enoch, a mysterious character who, according to the Bible itself, walked with God and was taken by him. And when we started to connect these pieces, we noticed something intriguing. For many ancient authors, the heavens were never just a pretty scene above the earth. They were seen as something much bigger, a system of signals, cycles, and messages. In the view of these texts, the sun, moon, and stars not only illuminated the world, they also marked important times. Maybe that's why, whenever an impressive phenomenon like the blood moon happens, so many people return to asking questions that span centuries. Can the heavens really point out important moments in history? Do phenomena like eclipses, red moons, or astronomical events have some kind of symbolic or spiritual meaning? Or is this all just a coincidence? These questions have long intrigued scholars, theologians, and the curious. And when we go back to ancient records, we discover that both Enoch and John described moments when heaven seemed to react to events that would change the course of humanity. In John's case, the vision appears at a dramatic moment, when events begin to unfold on earth and impressive signs appear in the sky, including a description that still draws attention today. a moon that becomes like blood. But what few people know is that the Book of Enoch, an ancient text preserved for centuries, also talks about something fascinating: the idea that the heavens follow a precise order, almost as if they functioned like a large clock that marks times and signs. And this is exactly where the story starts to get even more intriguing. Because when we put side by side what Enoch wrote about celestial cycles and what John described in Revelation, a question arises that few people actually stop to consider. Could events like the blood moon have been seen by the ancients as signs of something bigger happening in history? And to understand how this idea came about, we need to go back thousands of years and find out what the mysterious Book of Enoch really says about the signs in the heavens. Before we continue and delve even deeper into this fascinating topic about the blood moon, Enoch's revelations, and John's visions in Revelation, I want to ask a quick question to those of you watching. Have you ever heard that ancient texts, like the Book of Enoch and Revelation itself, mention signs in the sky, like the moon turning to blood? Because we often see these phenomena happen, find them interesting, take a photo, and move on with our lives. But when we begin to understand the content behind these signs, we realize that there is a much deeper story being discussed for thousands of years. And that's exactly why this video is so important. Here we are not just talking about a phenomenon in the sky. We are exploring connections between ancient texts, biblical prophecies, and signs that have always aroused curiosity in humanity. So I want to invite you to be part of this conversation. Leave it here in the comments. Do you believe that the blood moon can have any meaning beyond an astronomical phenomenon? Or is this all just a coincidence for you? Your comment is very important because it helps to create a healthy debate and also shows the algorithm that this type of content needs to reach more people who like biblical themes, prophecies, and ancient mysteries. And if you're enjoying this topic so far, take the opportunity to do two things that really help the channel. Leave a like, because this helps the video reach more people interested in studying and understanding these subjects. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos where we will continue exploring topics such as biblical prophecies, signs in the heavens, the Book of Enoch, and the mysteries of the apocalypse. Many people watch this type of content, find it interesting, but forget to subscribe. And when you sign up, you become part of this community that seeks to understand, delve deeper into these themes that cross generations. Now, get ready, because from here we are going to enter an even more intriguing part of this story. Let's go back thousands of years in time to understand what the Book of Enoch really reveals about the signs in the sky and the order of the stars, something that could completely change the way many people see phenomena like the blood moon. Now that we've gone back in time and started touching on what the Book of Enoch actually reveals about the heavens, this is where the story starts to get even more interesting. Because unlike many ancient texts that speak symbolically, the Book of Enoch goes into something very specific: the order of the stars, the cycles of the sky, and the functioning of the moon and the sun. According to this ancient text, the sky does not work randomly. On the contrary, there is a precise order, almost as if it were a perfectly organized mechanism. Enoch describes that the sun and moon follow defined paths, passing through what he calls the gates of heaven, appearing and disappearing according to very well-established cycles. For anyone reading this today, it may seem like just a poetic description, but when we look closely, we realize that Enoch was deeply concerned with showing that the heavens follow set patterns and times. This is something extremely important within ancient thought. For many ancient people, the heavens were seen as a great celestial clock, a system that marked seasons, harvests, festivities, and important moments in history. But in the case of the Book of Enoch, it seems that the idea goes even further. because he doesn't just talk about natural cycles, he suggests that these movements may also be linked to specific times within human history. This is exactly why many people who study ancient texts begin to look at phenomena like eclipses, red moons, and astronomical events in a different way, not necessarily as direct predictions of something that will happen immediately, but as markers within a larger time system. And here comes a curious detail. When Enoch describes the cycles of the moon, he talks about phases, changes in light, and periods in which the moon appears to gain or lose brightness. For the ancient world, these changes were not just beautiful to observe. They were signs that time was advancing within a great cosmic calendar. Now think about this for a moment. If the ancients believed that the sky functions as a type of calendar or clock, then unusual phenomena such as a moon appearing red would naturally draw a lot of attention, because something that deviates from the norm always raises questions. And that is exactly what happens to this day. Whenever a blood moon appears, thousands of people start researching, watching videos, reading ancient texts, and trying to understand if there is any meaning behind it. Some say it's just a total lunar eclipse, something completely explainable by science. And in fact, there is a scientific explanation for this phenomenon. But at the same time, there is something that draws attention. Even though eclipses are natural, many people still feel that there is something symbolically powerful about seeing the moon turn red in the sky. Perhaps because, for thousands of years, this type of phenomenon has always been seen as something remarkable. Now, when we return again to the Book of Enoch, we realize that it describes the heavens almost as if they were a language, a silent language. A language that does not speak with words, but with movements, cycles, and signs. And this makes many people today ask a very interesting question. If the heavens follow such a precise order, and if the ancients believed that this order also marked important times, could extraordinary phenomena have been interpreted as warnings, changes, or transitions within human history? This is exactly where the connection with Revelation begins to become even stronger. Because when John describes his visions, he also talks about signs happening in the sky before great events. And one of these signs is exactly the image of a moon that becomes like blood. This similarity between texts written in such different periods makes many people wonder if there is some kind of symbolic pattern being repeated, not necessarily as a mathematical prediction, but as a way of showing that at certain moments in history, people start looking at the sky again. And perhaps that is precisely what we are seeing happen now, because whenever a blood moon occurs, something curious happens to people. They stop, observe, they think, and they start asking questions that they normally wouldn't ask in everyday life. Questions about time, about signs, about history, and even about spirituality. Perhaps this is exactly what makes this phenomenon so powerful. Not just the color of the moon, but the fact that it makes millions of people look at the sky and reflect. And now I want to know something about you. When you saw or heard about the blood moon, what was the first thing that crossed your mind? Did you just think of an astronomical phenomenon? Or did you feel there was something symbolic about this moment? Write one of these sentences here in the comments. I really want to read your opinion. The blood moon is just a natural phenomenon, or the blood moon could be a sign. Or, if you prefer, simply comment, I'm watching the signs. I want to see how many people here really enjoy pondering signs in the sky, biblical prophecies, and the mysteries of the Book of Enoch. Because in the next moment of our conversation, we will connect Enoch's visions even more deeply with what John described in Revelation, and this connection may reveal something that many people never realized. If you've made it this far at the end of this video, it already shows something very interesting. You really enjoy reflecting on signs in the heavens, biblical prophecies, the Book of Enoch, and the mysteries surrounding the blood moon. Most people start a video like this out of curiosity, but only those who are really interested in understanding these topics stay until the end. And if you've made it this far, I want to extend a special invitation to you. First, subscribe to the channel. Here we explore exactly this type of content: biblical prophecies, ancient mysteries, signs in the sky, the Book of Enoch, revelation, and events that raise deep questions about our time. When you sign up, you become part of this community that likes to think beyond the obvious and seek to understand these topics in more depth. Now, I want to do something that I always like to see in the comments. If you actually watched until the end, write the sentence below: "I'm paying attention to the signs." This way, I can recognize who really got here and is following every detail of this content. And I also want to know your opinion. Do you believe that the blood moon can have some symbolic or spiritual meaning? Or for you, is it just a natural phenomenon? Also, don't forget to like the video, because this really helps the content reach more people who like topics such as biblical prophecies, celestial signs, and the mysteries of the Book of Enoch. And now I have a very important recommendation for you. The next video appears on your screen. In it, we will explore even more deeply another mystery linked to prophecies, signs in the sky, and events that many people believe are connected with current times. So click on this next video that is now appearing on the screen, because the conversation about the signs and the mysteries of the heavens is still there.